So I actually love questions like this because it gives me an opportunity to really talk about the authority of Scripture, its authenticity, and its reliability. The thing that you're using to try to point out, that Scripture can't be trusted, I believe is actually one of the reasons that it can be trusted all the more. Why do I say that? So first off, the first letters that were written of the New Testament were written not decades and decades after, but about 15 to at the most 20 years after the crucifixion. So what that means is that that people who were alive prior to the crucifixion, some of them, many of them followers of Jesus, would have still been alive in many of the churches after the crucifixion, and they would have been recipients of these various letters. So if Paul would have been writing something that would have contradicted the doctrine of Jesus that many of these individuals heard firsthand from Christ himself, it would have been easily, deemed heretical and tossed aside. But we don't find that. We don't see, Peter and John and these others writing against Paul's writings, correcting him because he's got bad information. Why? Because the other factor here is the church didn't start 20 years after the crucifixion or 30 years after the crucifixion. The church started immediately after the crucifixion. You could argue that it was even, kind of in function to some degree before the crucifixion. But we see at the day of Pentecost that this is right before, right after Jesus' ascension, that you already have the church meeting, worshiping, talking about the teachings of Jesus, going through, oral, accounts of the things that he said, preaching the gospel, all of this. And so this isn't, 15 or 20 years of nothing, and then all of a sudden somebody tries to recollect this. It was 15 or 20 years of the functioning of the church, worshiping together, developing Christian teaching, all of this stuff based upon what it was that Jesus had originally taught, and as well as the Old Testament writings, everything else. And so these New Testament letters are birthed out of, straight from the ministry of Jesus and from people that witnessed firsthand and were there to validate, to ensure that these letters and these teachings did not contradict the teachings of Jesus. So this is it's a historical fallacy that you're presenting. It's an illogical, concept that you're trying to push across, and that doesn't line up. We don't use that under any other, situation in history. When you think about 15 years of somebody writing a book, how many books have you all read that are written, 50 years after an event happened, and you still trust that because it's a historical book? Here we have firsthand accounts, 15 years after something happened and took place. This is without a doubt Scripture is the most reliable because I believe it's infallible and authoritative book on the planet.